So you live, work, and think that everything in your life is settled and on track. You've been married for 8 years, you've arranged the house, learned to ignore the noisy squabbles of the neighbors, and got used to the monotonous routine. Everything seemed so stable and predictable that I had almost forgotten what it was like to expect surprises from life. There are moments in life when you suddenly realize that all your happy story is just a skillfully played performance. I was naive, thinking that if you wear a wedding ring, you automatically get a ticket to a cloudless future. But in fact, my ideal wife all this time held behind my back another scenario, the one where I was not even in the main roles. Have you ever caught your soulmate in a lie that makes you clench in your chest? I also did not think that this would happen to me, until I caught my Ksyusha in frank confessions with another man. At that moment, something in me clicked and I realized that I wasn't going to be just a background in her romantic drama anymore. I'm going to make her understand what it's like to be alone in a world you yourself have destroyed. This story isn't about tears or pleas for forgiveness. It's about how easy it is to shatter someone else's dreams when they've decided to play with yours. And when you realize that the ending is inevitable, there is only one question: who will come out of this story a winner?
Thank you for watching my channel. I create videos for your enjoyment. Please subscribe if you want to support my efforts, it's very important to me. I apologize in advance for any mistakes, dubbing is done by neural network. Please point out mistakes in the comments so I can correct them.
My name is Damien. I am 30 and as it is commonly said, I am one of those who became a worker. You get up every day to work, bring home your honestly earned pennies, dreaming of money that will never come anyway. My city is a gray, typical angular monster, where almost every street bears the traces of time-worn history and generous dust. The street may be the same, but on it you can find a whole world full of hopes, broken dreams and lost souls like me. With my wife Serena, we'd been together so long that I sometimes felt like she and I had become something like a well-oiled machine. I didn't expect passion from her, but I believed that there was between us what was called family. Serena herself was kind, but perhaps a little tired of everything, of life, of everyday life of me. Or so I thought. So a year ago, I started noticing strange things. At first it was nothing special. She came home from work later, then more and more often she went out for hen parties. Seems innocent, right? And you say to yourself, don't be paranoid, all girls want to spend time with their friends. But then I started getting calls at night, whispers in the hallway that would suddenly stop if I was around. So I thought, Damien, isn't it time you woke up your ears? But inwardly I was saying, no, it can't be. Well, I didn't want to admit that I too, like all mortals, could have, well, let's call it romantic tragedy. Honestly, from the moment I began to suspect something was wrong, my life was turned upside down. You go to bed, and you're thinking the same thing. What if she really is, with someone else? It would be just boredom. But no, this thought begins to gnaw from the inside, like a mouse with a bag of cereal, and by morning from your peace of mind there is nothing left but husks. On our wedding anniversary, 8 years by the way, I had a unique chance to confirm my worst suspicions. Serena left her phone on the table and went to take a shower. I wouldn't have touched it before, but at that moment, curiosity got the better of me. So I stand over that phone like Sherlock over the clues, thinking, should I open this treasure trove of secrets, or do I already know everything? Maybe I should have just stepped aside, as the sages advise, but I sent all that pseudo-righteous introspection to hell and picked up her phone. And, I wish I'd just turned around and walked away. But of course, I clicked on the screen and went into Messenger, where I soon discovered the whole treasure trove of secrets. That's where it all started. Have you ever heard the phrase, hit the bullseye? Well, this phone became for me that very bullseye, and I hit it with such accuracy that I was surprised. It turned out that there is not just a correspondence, but a whole history of relationships. And such that even my rich life experience did not help me immediately realize the depth of this tragicomedy. Right in the phone, cozily nestled chat rooms full of sentimental confessions and ardent feelings, as they call it. I sit and read, and with each new message I want to either laugh or fall through the ground. Her lover is a certain Nate. At first glance, a completely mundane name, but with each message I felt that behind this Nate hides something much more. What kind of a poet would you have to be to come up with the phrase, your flower comes to life with me? If someone asked me what it smells like, I'd say something like cheap soap. But my Serena must have liked that kind of sweetness. There were flowers and morning cafes, and endless arguments about what kind of spiritual union they had with him. I almost choked, Who knew that in so many years she had carried so much spirituality that she had never talked to me about? Everywhere you turn, only poems and roses, as if this Nate is almost Pushkin in a new guise. I keep browsing, and inside I already have a pulse like a marathon runner, my thoughts are racing, and I feel, how to say it, anger mixed with longing. Every message, every phrase, is like a point that digs deeper. Not only is she dating him, but she's basically building a parallel life, where I'm just, well, a backup or something. I read their correspondence, and from these phrases it is immediately clear, I am not there and cannot be. For her now I am just a background on which this romantic epic is unfolding. It turns out that not only I every day spinning like a squirrel in a wheel, bringing home a paycheck, but she, it turns out, found herself an invitation to a completely different life. At that moment, everything inside me changed. Before that, I was probably too naive. I believed that this is my fortress, my quiet harbor, where you can hide from the outside world. And it turns out she's not a harbor at all, but a goddamn ferry that takes people back and forth, with someone new on every trip. So I'm sitting here with this phone in my hand thinking, what now? How do I move on? Should I forgive her? Talk to her? Forget? But the longer I thought about it, the clearer it became, it's not forgiveness I need, but something more serious. It's not just betrayal, it's like someone spit on you. So in that moment, I made a decision. A decision I would never have made before, but after reading this, it became the only possible choice. I decided that revenge would be my gift to her. I sat with this phone and realized that there was no time to think. In my head immediately began to flash different options. To expose her in front of friends, to make a scandal for the whole city, or just pack up and leave. But the more I thought, the more I wanted not just to leave, but to make her regret her flower affair for the rest of her life. The idea began to mature like a good brandy. I decided that I should prepare everything calmly, without fuss. Let Serena suspect nothing, let her live in her illusory world for a while longer. In the meantime, I would compile my own dossier on her and her Nate. Every morning now I woke up with the feeling that it was going to be a special day, even if it started out the same way it always did. There seemed to be an underlying falsity in every look she gave me, every word she said now. I was disgusted, but I pretended it wasn't happening. Everything went according to plan. Breakfast together, a kiss goodbye, and I caught every little detail, every look and word, as if it were all part of my future masterpiece. She continued her evenings with her friends, went to work with the appearance of employment, as if they were handing out tickets to paradise. Well, I'll give her that paradise. Just not the one she's dreaming of. First thing I did was find an old camera with a decent zoom. We live in a small town where everyone knows everyone, so finding where she meets this Pushkin was not difficult. After walking a couple times along the suggested routes, I already knew where they prefer to meet. Turns out it wasn't that hard to catch them. And then it was a matter of technique. One time I caught them near a cafe, another time, near some old building. They sit there together like a pair of lovebirds, and I sit quietly aside and take documentary photos. At some point I even felt like a real spy. Surveillance techniques are no joke. It's exciting, let me tell you. I learned to walk so that I wouldn't be noticed, chose the right angles and watched their romance as if it were some horror movie. The more pictures and notes I took, the more my sense of entitlement grew. After all, I wasn't the one who betrayed, I wasn't the one who went left. I was, so to speak, documenting her true colors. And then I decided that for the full effect I needed one more finishing touch. Let her continue to think she had everything under control. But when our anniversary comes, she will get her gift, a scrapbook created with love and attention to detail. Every night before I went to bed, I would mentally visualize this moment. I would see her eyes as she would flip through the pages, starting with our pictures together and then slowly moving on to the shots I had taken myself. I imagined how the color would slowly fade from her face, how the rosy cheeks would be replaced by a dead pallor, how she would realize what I had known all along. And then the day came. The anniversary day crept up unnoticed, as days like this always do. It seemed like only 8 years together, but it felt so heavy, as if we had lived a whole life. I, of course, prepared. I ironed my shirt, shaved, well, everything as a husband preparing for a date with his wife. I even chose gift wrapping for the album to make it look beautiful and solemn. I prepared not just a gift, but a real production. I invited her to a restaurant, our favorite, which we visited only on holidays. It was paradoxical, of course, but it was there, where there were so many good memories, that I was going to leave another one, but now of a different kind. Serena, apparently, did not suspect anything. She came as usual, dressed up with a smile. She even looked happy, as if she was looking forward to our special evening. We ordered wine, then dinner. I acted as if nothing had happened. Compliments, stories about how much I appreciated our past moments together. Well, in short, I played the perfect husband. She was getting more and more relaxed, starting to believe that we had everything under control. Even her eyes glistened with delight. At some point I even wondered how she felt, being between two fires. Here I am, her eternal partner, and somewhere out there her passionate poet. But I, as they say, was not in a hurry to chop from the shoulder. I kept the necessary pause. Waiting in such matters is half the success. When the moment came to present the gift, I did it like a real gentleman. I handed her the box, wrapped in holiday wrapping, with a smile that gave even myself goosebumps. She unpacked it, pulled out an album, and smiled even wider, clearly not expecting anything but cute family photos. I leaned toward her slightly, nodding. "Leaf through, dear, it's all for you." On the first few pages she saw our old photos, the ones we'd taken back in the early days of our relationship. There are trips and evenings out with friends, everything that should have reminded her that I was once everything to her. As she leafed through, I could see her face soften a little, and there was a slight nostalgia in her eyes. Apparently Serena had decided it was just a nice anniversary gift. But then the pages began to change. Where she'd expected to see the two of us, suddenly there were pictures of her and him. They weren't anything too explicit, just shots of her sitting with Dmitri, hugging him, looking at him with a sincerity I hadn't seen in years. I chose each photo so that it didn't just show her friendly affection, but spoke directly about the fact that there was far more than just friendship between them. She freezes, turning a page, another, and I watch. Her hands shook, she swallowed the lump in her throat, and panic slowly appeared on her face. I could almost see her thoughts racing frantically, trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. Her composure was crumbling as well as all her excuses, which she must have been preparing in case something suddenly came to light. And when she got to the end of the album, where there were screenshots of their correspondence, those poetic confessions and spiritual unions, I couldn't stand it and said, "Surprise, darling. This album is a symbol of our honesty." Ksyusha sat in front of me, her eyes full of horror and disbelief. Her face was pale, and it was evident how she was trying to keep at least a drop of calm. I continued to sit there with a smile, as if what was happening was just a joke she was about to realize. She tried to say something, but it was like her tongue was slurring. The words seemed to be stuck in her throat like a fishbone, and every time she tried to make a sound, I could see her getting worse. In the end she could only squeeze out one thing, "Damien. It's some kind of misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I interjected, leaning slightly towards her. "Are you saying that I misunderstood seeing you with another man? That your tulip confession was just a joke? Or maybe you're just going to work with him, huh? Just a couple of rhyming lines." She tried to justify herself, babbling something about it being a mistake, and that it doesn't mean anything. But each of her pathetic arguments only fueled my anger more. The more she tried to convince me of some ridiculous fairy tale, the more obvious it became that she was trying to reassure herself that everything would blow over and remain on the level of a quiet family scandal. I continued to watch her with cold calmness, like a doctor informing a patient of a disappointing diagnosis. When her excuses and pleas began to sound too desperate, I leaned closer and said quietly, "You think this is all just going to go away? That I, like a fool, will just close my eyes and move on? No, Serena, you won't get off scot-free. I've spent too much time and effort on this exhibition to just let you brush me off." She fell silent, realizing the situation was getting out of control. I felt that at this point she finally realized that nothing was going to go according to her script. That's when I added the most important thing. "You know the best part, Serena? Your Nate is already aware of all these photos and correspondence. And he didn't seem too happy to find out that you were willing to tear our whole family apart for your poetic love." Her eyes widened with shock. She now realized that I had shattered her illusions not only on our front, but also on the one where she had hoped to find her happiness. Nate, upon learning of my gift, did not want to be embroiled in a scandal, fearing for his reputation and his spiritual integrity. No matter how many flower tulips he had in there, he chose to flee, leaving her with this album filled with confessions and true love. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and quietly added, "Consider it our anniversary present, Serena." Now you can stay with your album and your dreams of how things might have once been different. But this night, this moment, it will forever be your reminder of what happens when you play with other people's feelings and think you won't get caught. When I returned home after this anniversary, I no longer thought that I had completed my plan. On the contrary, I was seized by a new feeling, the desire to make Zayusha really feel the full weight of the consequences of their actions. One night with the album is just an introduction. She must realize that she has destroyed not only our relationship, but also her own life. The first thing I did was to look into her finances. All of our bank accounts and savings were in my name, and she only had access through power of attorney. At first, I just disconnected her from all joint cards. Let her run around. Let her realize she can no longer go to the store out of habit, without my care. Depriving her of even simple pleasures was the first step. Next, I decided that her job shouldn't remain sacred either. I know it sounds petty, but when you thought all this time that the person next to you is sincere, and he ends up being a lying traitor, such thoughts seem completely justified. I tracked down her boss. Luckily in our small town everyone knows about each other, and unobtrusively told him that Serena at work is not only doing her own thing, but also had an affair with a colleague. Let their office pushkin also feel what it's like to lose ground when you're brought out into the open. And of course, I haven't forgotten the importance of leaving a footprint on social media. I didn't plan on posting her correspondences or compromising photos. That would have been too much. But I knew it was worth it to tweak her image a bit. I went to her profile and left some neat posts with hints. Let her friends, neighbors, and even casual acquaintances know that behind that pretty face lurked someone who wasn't shy about playing on two fronts. Gradually my revenge grew new ideas, and her every step towards a new life was now closed. It was as if she was in a cage she had built herself, and with every action I took, she realized more and more that this cage was slammed shut for a long time. After the first few steps, I began to notice the world around her changing. Of course she tried to contact me, to explain herself, to justify herself, but I didn't even dignify her with a reply. Let her live in silence. Let her world slowly disintegrate without my intervention and support. The first thing Serena tried to do was to return to her normal life. She went to work as if nothing had happened. But there was a surprise waiting for her there. Our mutual acquaintance, to whom I had planted some information in advance, managed to tell everyone the necessary details of her personal life. Now every one of her colleagues, from the guard at the entrance to the cleaning lady, knew what she was doing behind her husband's back. No one threw accusations in her face, but the stares, the talking behind her back, it was worse for her than open conflict. Showing up at the office became a real ordeal for her. Not a couple days later, I found out that her romantic hero Nate had hastily quit. Apparently, he thought that by disappearing, he would get rid of all the inconveniences. And my dear Serena was left alone in her workplace, where every day she was reminded of her glorious exploits. But that was only one element of my plan. Next, I decided to strike at something she seemed to hold especially dear, her impeccable image among friends and acquaintances. I had always known that she carefully maintained the image of perfect wife and model friend. Well, it was time to tweak that image a bit. Neat, casual conversations with her friends came up. I didn't lash out at anyone, I didn't say anything directly, just friendly, hinted that Serena was going through a tough time and maybe her election was far from as flawless as she likes to show. The friends picked up on this information instantly, as is usually the case when someone finds themselves in the role of a secret news agent. And now it was no longer me who was talking about her actions, but her closest friends, with whom she went to bachelorette parties. One by one, they began to turn away, each finding reasons to distance themselves, but everyone understood the real reason. Serena found herself isolated. She had lost her job, her friends, and right there I knew she would try to come back to me as her last salvation. As expected, after a few weeks Serena started to get in touch. In the beginning, they were timid messages, the standard apologies, something along the lines of, "I need to talk, and please let's meet up." Ignoring them was even pleasant. She clearly hadn't expected her perfect world to come crashing down so quickly. But the best part began when she finally decided to come over to my house. That evening I hear someone knocking on the door, I open it, and there she is, all lost, with eyes full of despair, not the confident woman she was a couple months ago. She barely whispered, "Damien, can I talk to you?" I silently let her into the apartment, but I had to admit that my insides were already churning with schadenfreude. She'd come to me for forgiveness. Now was the perfect opportunity to complete her revenge. She walked into the living room, sat down on the couch, and in a shaky voice, began to squeeze out some prepared apology. Talking about how everything had happened by accident, that she had made a mistake, that it wasn't serious. I sat across from her, looking at her and almost grinning as she tried to justify what she'd done with pathetic phrases. Every argument she made sounded like another insult. I kept silent, letting her talk, letting her say everything she'd accumulated over time, as if her words mattered. When she finally stopped talking, I looked at her and, holding back the sarcasm, said, "So it was just a mistake, right? Well, everyone makes mistakes, except, every mistake has a price." I saw her go pale as she realized that my words were not a hint of forgiveness, but an announcement of the final verdict. I told her I knew about her attempts to contact everyone she'd lost, her friends, her coworkers, even Nate, who disappeared from town altogether. I told her bluntly that her life had fallen apart not because she had made a mistake, but because every choice she had made had led her to this point. She was only naive to think she could live a double life without losing any of her assets. She tried to beg, tears building in her eyes again, but I interrupted her and declared that there would be no forgiveness, not today, not tomorrow, not ever again. All her tears, all her attempts to justify herself meant exactly nothing to me. You may have thought I was the forever husband who would wait and forgive. Well, you were wrong, I said, getting up from the couch. Now you live with all this as best you can. You know what the best part is? I really did think you were mine. Turns out you were just someone else's illusion, nothing more. I opened the door and gestured for her to leave. Serena sat there for a long moment, not believing it would end this way, but when she saw my gaze, she realized I wouldn't say anything else. She slowly got up and walked out, leaving behind only the slight scent of perfume and the feeling that I was finally free.